Hello, welcome to the Labor Forum. You are tuned into WRFG at 89.3 FM in Atlanta. We also can be heard on the web at WRFG.org, on our mobile app, and the Labor Forum is also streamed live on YouTube. You can watch us right now and see me and Neil sitting here as we are getting ready to start this program. We've got some great information to pass along and some great guests. I am a retired auto worker and have been the host of this program for over 4 years now, which is hard to believe, really hard to believe how time has flown by. I want to give a big thanks to Gary Washington, who started this program back in 1986 and who held it down for a number of years, and who I always appreciate when he calls after the program, so maybe we'll hear from Gary today. The opinions that are expressed on the Labor Forum may not necessarily be those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG. Before I begin, I do want to make note that Atlanta is expecting to have both cold and perhaps icy weather, and that among the many people who are impacted all the time by weather are those that don't have shelter, those that are homeless. So I want to let folks know that if you still have the capacity to take blankets and water to the Task Force for the Homeless at the corner of Peachtree and Pine, that would be most appreciated. One of the issues, of course, is for people who are outdoors is that their clothing, their bedding gets soaked, and and then when the temperatures fall, that becomes a most dangerous situation. So we will start with our regular outline of how we have segmented the program now that we are a full hour on Mondays, and that is we start off with labor headlines, and then we'll move on to This Week in Labor History. Then we have our guest in the studio, Neil Sardana, who's going to talk about what's happening next Monday, February 23rd. And then our last guest, and I hope everybody stays tuned in for, will be a telephone call with Ai-Jen Poo, who is with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. So here are the labor headlines for Monday, February 16th. Many people may not know that while the U.S. plays a huge role in many international bodies, it is not a signatory to a number of the treaties and conventions that form what is called international law, and that the vast majority of other countries have ratified. One of those is Convention 87 of the International Labor Organization, which was founded in 1919 to develop global standards of worker rights. Of the 8 core conventions, the U.S. has only signed 2, one on forced labor and another on the worst forms of child labor. A third on discrimination is held up in the Senate. Convention 87, which the U.S. has not signed, outlines the right to freedom of association, meaning the right to organize and join a union without restriction or repercussion from government authorities. The convention has long been understood to include the right to strike. However, employer groups and certain governments continue to challenge this right to withhold one's labor as a means to attain a negotiated settlement with an employer. In advance of an ILO meeting in March, international labor organizations are calling for a global day of action on February 18th to challenge this effort by multinational corporations to curtail the rising movement of workers for living wages and safe working conditions. And on a further note, on February 4th, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled that a law denying the right to strike by certain public sector workers was unconstitutional, in part because of Canada's ratification of Convention 87. This is an important decision for Canadian public workers and exposes the deepening attacks on similar workers in the U.S. And one more piece of international news. Workers, students, pensioners, and others continue to rally in large numbers since the election of the anti-austerity Syriza party to office in Greece. Yesterday, thousands gathered again in front of the Parliament building in Athens to show support for efforts to renegotiate the onerous terms of the bailout, which has brought massive unemployment and suffering to the majority of Greeks. Dozens of solidarity demonstrations were held on Sunday in Paris, London, and other European countries. The Greek election is being seen as a signal that the non-stop assault by the banks and corporations can be stopped. And for national news, the Labor Forum wants to bring your attention to a struggle on the West Coast by approximately 20,000 members of the ILWU, that's the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, who load and unload a full quarter of U.S. foreign trade at some 29 ports from Long Beach and Oakland, California to Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. The estimated value of this cargo, including automobiles, clothing, and electronics, is $1.1 trillion. These workers who operate huge cranes and other equipment and monitor the cargo have been working without a contract since July 1st, 2014. The Pacific Maritime Association, which operates the ports, halted all operations from February 12th through today, causing a backup of dozens of ships waiting to be loaded and reloaded. This essentially was a lockout to force the workers to accept whatever the giant shipping companies were offering. Retail and manufacturing associations then increased its pressure on the Obama administration to intervene, citing the impact the shutdown would have on the fragile economy. So on Saturday, U.S. Labor Secretary Tom Perez was sent to meet with the PMA and the ILWU. Business groups such as the Chamber of Commerce and anti-union legislators have been urging the Obama administration to make use of the Taft-Hartley law, which allows the president to intervene by putting in an 80-day so-called cooling off period, setting up a fact-finding panel which, if it cannot resolve the matter, forces the union members to vote on the last offer made by management. The ILWU, especially Local 10, like the Boston Bus Drivers Local, have fiercely defended the gains of their contracts which provide their members with good jobs and benefits. Both are also engaged in important solidarity actions with the community. The Labor Forum will continue to keep you updated on this struggle. And that's our labor headlines for today, and we're going to move now to our labor history. Hi, Tamika. We've been joined in the studio by Tamika Atkins, who is with the local chapter of the Domestic Workers Alliance, and she is now one of our co-hosts on a 2 or 3 times a month basis. We're so happy she's going to be here today because she's also going to be talking with Ai-Jen later this afternoon. So Tamika, go right ahead. Oh, I have to say why Paul isn't here. Some people are going, where's Paul? He's who does labor history. Today's Paul's birthday. I guess he's out having a good time, celebrating. I hope he's not here in the city where he can be someplace maybe where it's warm and nice. So, okay, Tamika, please go ahead with our labor headlines. Labor history.
Thanks, Diane. So, 2 stories this week about 2 women who played important roles but are not very well known. The first is about Laura Collins, a sales clerk and member of the Retail Clerks Union, which later became the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. On February 19, 1975, the U.S. Supreme Court decided in favor of Laura Collins and her union in National Labor Relations Board versus J. Weingarten Incorporated. This case established that workers have a right to request the presence of their union steward if they believe they are to be disciplined for a workplace infraction. In June 1972, Laura Collins, a lunch counter sales clerk for the J. Weingarten store number 98 in Houston, Texas, was called into her store manager's office and questioned by the manager and an undercover investigator employed by the store. Unknown to her, the investigator had put Ms. Collins under surveillance for the previous 2 days. He had been investigating a report that she was stealing money from the lunch counter cash register. His investigation had turned up no evidence of wrongdoing, but the other manager had received a report from another employee that Ms. Collins had purchased a box of chicken that sold for $2.98, but had only placed $1 in the cash register. During the questioning regarding this incident, Ms. Collins requested several times that her shop steward or another union representative from her union, Local 455 of the retail clerks, be called into the interrogation room. Her repeated requests for such assistance were denied. In response to questions about the chicken, Ms. Collins explained that she had only taken $1 worth of food, but had used a larger box to place it in because the store had run out of smaller boxes. The investigator left the office and confirmed this fact with other store employees. Returning to the interview, he told Collins that her explanation had checked out, that he was sorry if he had inconvenienced her, and that the matter was closed. Ms. Collins then said the only thing she had ever gotten from the store without paying for was her free lunch. In a Weingarten store where she had previously worked for 9 years prior to her transfer, free lunches were a regular policy. The manager and investigator began to question her again, and she again requested the presence of her shop steward, which the store manager denied. During the course of the questioning, the investigator asked Ms. Collins to sign a statement admitting she owed the store $160 for the lunches. She refused. When the company's headquarters confirmed the free lunch policy, the interrogation was ended, and she was told she could leave, and she was ordered to keep the matter to herself. Instead, she went directly to her union representatives, and an unfair labor practice charge was filed. Short of the right to organize and join a union, there are few rights more sacred to the labor movement than the right to have union representation during an interrogation. For every right won, there's a story of bold people who take a stand against injustice. The courage and determination of Laura Collins makes her one of the labor movement's heroes. Her action resulted in lasting changes to the laws which protect us. The second story this week is about Florence Kelly, who died on February 17, 1932. She was born in 1859 and grew up in a family of Philadelphia Quakers with long-standing commitments to the abolition of slavery, universal suffrage, and the education, literacy, and rights of women. Her work against sweatshops, for the 8-hour day, and for children's rights is widely regarded today. A persuasive speaker and a powerful writer throughout her life, she taught literacy and law and supported herself and her children by working as a translator and as a journalist. When she was young, her father had taken her through glass factories at night. Influenced by what she had seen, she fought to make it illegal for children under the age of 14 to work, to limit the hours of children under 16, and to give children the right of education. In 1893, the governor of Illinois made her chief factory inspector, the first factory inspector for the state of Illinois. She earned her law degree from Northwestern University in 1895. In 1899, she became head of the National Consumers League, a position she held for over 30 years. Working for the NCL, she organized local leagues and lobbied for better working conditions and minimum wage and shorter working hours legislation. In 1909, the NCL launched a minimum wage campaign, which eventually succeeded in obtaining the passage of 14 state laws for women. She later helped extend such state legislation to male workers. In 1909, she also helped create the NAACP, where she met her friend and ally, W.E.B. Du Bois. In 1919, Florence Kelly was a founding member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and for several years she served as vice president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Remembered for her firmness and fierce energy, she died in Philadelphia on February 17, 1932.
Thank you, Tamika. Again, two incredible women that most of us probably didn't know anything about. Part of what's important here at the Labor Forum is not only talking about what's current, but those that have gone before us that have made the difference, so that we actually have the labor movement that we have currently, and that we have the example of them. So thank you so much. We're going to turn right away to our guest, who's seated between Tamika and me, if you're watching. And, and Neil Sardana has been here on the Labor Forum multiple times. He is organizing director of the Local Jobs with Justice. We invited Neil to come on because kind of in this segment of the program we've been trying to highlight you know, struggles that are current, that are happening right now, events that are taking place that are important for you, our listening audience, to know about. So we invited Neil because next Monday there's a whole day and evening of actions that workers would be most important to know about. So Neil, give us an idea what's going to happen next Monday.
Yeah, definitely. So, so as many folks may be familiar, maybe not everyone, we've been joining this ongoing movement, Moral Monday movement, that's been building here throughout the state of Georgia, and you know, we're basically having a major action as a part of Moral Monday, and in conjunction with many other organizations, including Atlanta Jobs with Justice, the AFL-CIO of Georgia, and the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council, to take action on our economy, to take action on workers' rights in our state, and in particular to really lift up the issues of income inequality, economic injustice, and low wages that so many people in our state have been dealing with, and that so many people go struggling day to day, having to make decisions on whether they can put food on their table for their families, get medicine that they need to take care of themselves, paying rent and utilities and whatnot. You know, these are decisions that many hardworking people have to make, and certainly they do it many times working several jobs and still struggling to get by. And so we're basically raising you know, awareness about this issue, getting folks to take action on these issues, because we know our communities deserve to be lifted up, and that everyone who works deserves a fair pay and rights on the job. So we're calling for a Moral Monday rally to raise wages from 0 to 15.
And that is actually not even, in some regards, enough still.
Yeah.
But again, for workers who make in $7.25, that would be it would make a huge difference. So Neil, what are some of the bills, either good ones or not so good ones, that are likely to be introduced or have been introduced in the Georgia Assembly, which will have an impact directly on workers?
Yeah, so yeah, there's many different bills that we're going to highlight, and many different campaigns and actions that multiple organizations have been fighting for. We have you know, HB 8, which is a bill that was sponsored by our great friends Tyrone Brooks and Representative Dewey McClain. That's a bill that would essentially raise the minimum wage in the state of Georgia to $15 an hour, and we think that, you know, these bills being introduced is really starting to change the conversation and help, you know, raise awareness about the fact that people in our state can't continue to live on $7.25. So that's one of the major bills. There's another effort currently moving through the House and Senate around worker misclassification. And what this issue is that many employers hire people as contractors, independent contractors, as opposed to employees, but in essence they're actually being treated like employees. They're being managed by these companies, but hired as independent contractors. And what this does is it allows those companies hiring these workers to get out of paying unemployment benefits, to get out of, you know, to make it very easy to discard these workers at any point in time, and it basically prevents them from taking all the major responsibilities that traditional employers use. So they're using this method as a kind of like a loophole to hire all these people, but then not paying their fair share as everyone else does. And what this is doing is drawing down the unemployment rolls in our state. And so we're challenging that, and there's a bill that's moving that's gonna help end that misclassification issue.
We've had programs here about the misclassification. As you said, it's the explosion really of temp agencies, not just in this city but all across the country, where workers can actually work for years at a location, getting very, very low wages and no benefits. And the corporation gets off, as you said, they don't pay Social Security, they don't pay into workers' comp, they don't pay in the state income taxes, they don't do any of it. And so this is a big issue. This is how a lot of companies have really increased their profit margin to the detriment of many, many, many thousands of workers and their families.
Yeah.
So can you, in the next couple of minutes, explain exactly what's going to happen on the 23rd and the sequence of events and where they are?
Yeah, and there were just a couple quick other issues I wanted to highlight too. You know, we're taking action across on the issue that the governor had proposed cutting healthcare benefits for school workers throughout the state. That includes bus drivers and cafeteria workers and some school teachers. We also wanted to highlight the need for, our state doesn't have any policy that prevents those from the LGBTQ community from being discriminated against on the job. There's many instances of workers being fired needlessly just because of their sexual orientation, and there's a bill called the Fair Employment Practices Act that has been recently introduced, which actually does have bipartisan support, and so we want to show support for that as well. And there's also a bill related to banning the box, which one of our partners, 9 to 5 Working Women, is leading on, and that essentially allows workers, when they apply for jobs, to not have to upfront, disclose their criminal record history, and to actually give them a fair chance to go through the applications process, to have their qualifications really looked at before having to disclose those criminal histories, and then gives them the opportunity to explain and say, this is what happened, here's like how I've changed and how I'm moving forward. And so that it makes it so much greater access to jobs for those with these histories. So we're essentially bringing that issue to the fore with this rally as well. And we see that the low wage issue, while wages are an important issue, there's also a lot of other social and community concerns that come around with low wages jobs in our communities. So we want to bring those all into this.
If I could just make a comment as well about this ban the box struggle. I mean, one of the things that's so clear is the huge number of people that are incarcerated in the United States, the huge number, particularly of youth of color, that get jammed up on sometimes the most petty and least criminal activities, and yet end up with a record. And then even for those who have gotten caught up, for example, with arrest for marijuana or for something like that, or a woman who gets arrested for writing a bad check because she was trying to keep her utilities on through a cold month and she didn't have enough money actually in the account. These are some of the stories one hears about the number of people who so-called have a record, and it always kind of just drives me crazy when I think about the fraud that all these banks have admitted to in terms of the foreclosure. I don't believe any of those CEOs or whoever have gotten a record.
Yeah, many of them may be let go, but most of them still have no problem finding jobs, even after crashing our entire economy. So it's a very, it's a very severe issue for those, throughout our communities. But those at the very top always tend to be excluded from these issues.
So again, the time and location for the events that are going to happen on next Monday, February 23rd.
Yeah, so February 23rd, before the rally, there's going to be a common sense economics workshop, and that's going to be at 3 p.m. and that's going to be at Central Presbyterian Church across the street from the Georgia Capitol. Then at 4 o'clock, we're going to have folks starting to gather inside the Capitol. And in the center of the Capitol Rotunda, and that's on the second floor. and then the rally itself will start at 4:30 p.m. and then we'll close at 6 o'clock. And then we're also encouraging folks to join the Shadows of Liberty film, which will be at the IBW auditorium after the rally.
So Neil, if there's anyone out there listening who wants to get some more information, wants to get involved in Jobs with Justice or any of the other groups that are putting this particular event on, how do they do it?
So folks can go to our website. It's www.atlantajwj.org. And also you can go to our Facebook if you search for Atlanta JWJ or Atlanta Jobs with Justice. And then you can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at Atlanta JWJ, and all this information will be available there. And we do have an event on Facebook that folks can go and take a look, and has all these details there and the timing of this event.
So let me just ask one final question. So, we're seeing, we're seeing the Fight for 15. We're seeing the organizing among domestic workers and just a whole lot of people who have always been sort of, felt that they couldn't organize. They wouldn't be organizable. They were too transitory in their jobs or whatever. So what do you attribute this, I would really call it a sea change, in the groups that are the most active in trying to both organize for higher wages, organize a union, and then actually become much more vocal and present in the face of the powers that be that have been essentially causing so much misery and poverty?
Oh yeah, I think it's it's 2015. We live in the United States of America, and it's just an absolute shame, living in the wealthiest country in the world, that there's still people who work, very hard, who struggle on a day-to-day basis, putting in lots of hours on the job, and then they're still struggling to, to feed themselves and their families. And I think there's just been this growing understanding that, the system is broken, the economy is not working for an insane amount of people, and I think in particular post the economic crisis, people are realizing that this insane wealth gap is really driving this issue, and there's really no way to get around it without really restructuring how much wealth is concentrated at the top versus how little wages are given to the vast majority of those working class citizens. And so I think it's just people are fed up, and they're ready for something different. And us coming together, I think we're helping make that a possibility.
Well, thanks so much, Neil.
Thank you.
So listeners, we have a brief message as soon as I believe our interview might be on the line. We'll listen to that brief message, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Labor Forum. This is Diane Mathewitz and Tamika Atkins. We are both here. And you just heard the announcement about Ai-Jen being in town tomorrow. But hey, she's on the phone right now, and you'll get a little preview of what you can expect when you turn out to Karis tomorrow night. So welcome to the Labor Forum, Ai-Jen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So may I ask, what city are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York City right now, but I'm about to get on a plane to Atlanta. I'll be with you soon.
Okay, well, it's wet. So make sure you have an umbrella. So welcome so much. So Tamika is seated right next to me, and I'm going to let her go ahead, although there was kind of an introduction in that announcement that you just heard that we've been broadcasting here on the station. But she knows you well, so I'm going to let her go ahead and let our audience get some of the insight about who you are.
Hi, Ai-Jen. How are you doing?
Hi, Tamika. Great to hear you.
Can't wait to see you tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see our members, too.
I know. They're coming out in full force for the book event tomorrow. They're so excited about reading The Age of Dignity.
Oh, great.
So just a little bit about Ai-Jen for our audience. Ai-Jen has been organizing immigrant women workers since 1996. In 2007, Ai-Jen Poo founded the National Domestic Workers Alliance. In 2011, In response to the growing call for domestic workers who were hired as nannies and housekeepers to provide home care for their employers' aging relatives, Poo launched Caring Across Generations in partnership with Jobs of Justice to address two of the major social issues of our time: widespread unemployment and the coming need for care for the nation's expanding aging population. So the Age of Dignity was written to inspire change in the way that we care for one another in this country. At the intersection of our aging population, the fraying safety net and opportunities for women and immigrants in the workforce, the book weaves personal stories into solutions to address America's new demographic and economic realities, particularly the growing need for caregivers. These solutions will benefit families and care workers while generating millions of new quality jobs in the process. Ai-Jen, was that a good description of you and this amazing book that you wrote?
Yes, it is. And I would add that I was part of a group of about 50 domestic workers and organizers who founded the National Domestic Workers Alliance together at the U.S. Social Forum in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We were founded in the great city of Atlanta. So Atlanta has a really important history for our movement, and that's why I'm so excited to be coming tonight.
Not only that, I wanted to just say, there were two other things that maybe should be mentioned before we get into what we want to talk about specifically. And that is that you were part as well in 2000 in ensuring that in New York State a domestic workers' Bill of Rights got passed, and that was very important. I want to, when we get to the interview part, I want to talk about that a little more, because the National Labor Relations Act had always sort of I wouldn't even say overlooked, deliberately excluded domestic workers, farm workers and others from coverage under what is sort of considered the ways and norms of being able to be in a union. The other thing I wanted to say is I don't know that I know, not that I know you, but I know you. You're the only McArthur Fellow that I believe we've had on the Labor Forum, and so I'm like excited about that. So people should know that this is a program that recognizes really impactful individuals who have made groundbreaking differences in different areas, and Ai-Jen got that award last year, 2014, correct? Mm-hmm. All right, so let's move into, after we've lauded you so much now, and all totally deserved, let's move into this topic of both what your book is about. You should know that I am one of those aging baby boomers, and I think this is a topic of interest, obviously, to literally millions of people here in the United States. Many of us still have good and great health, but obviously, as we look around, we can see how the institutions that have traditionally sort of been where people are often confined when their families are unable to care for them at home aren't really meeting the needs at all. So let's talk about how you would describe what the situation is for elder care.
Sure. So we are experiencing what we call the elder boom, with the baby boom generation reaching retirement age such that in 2015 alone, 4 million people will turn 65. And then as a result of improvements in healthcare and technology, people are living longer than ever. So my grandmother's demographic is the fastest growing demographic in the country. That's 87 and older. So by 2030, 20% of our population will be over the age of 65. And by 2050, that means that 27 million of us will need long-term care and assistance just to meet our basic daily needs. And most of us want to age at home and in our communities, connected to family, to loved ones, to friends. And we just don't have the infrastructure in place, including the workforce, to support that. Now, I think it's a huge opportunity, and we all at the National Domestic Workers Alliance and with Caring Across Generations see it not only as an opportunity to make sure that the aging boomers and all of our elders have real choices when it comes to how they live later in life, but also for us to create millions of good jobs. And what I mean by that is, for generations, this work has been poverty wage work,
That's right.
not even recognized as real work. So the people that we've counted on to take care of the people that we love can't take care of their loved ones. They can't take care of their kids and their families because they don't earn enough to make ends meet. And it's a completely unsustainable situation. And frankly, something fundamentally kind of morally wrong about that. Not only does it not work, but it says something about the soul of our country, which I think we have the opportunity to reverse now. And so we think that the Caring Majority Alliance that we must build, including baby boomers, millennials who really care about their grandparents, workers, care workers, and all of their families, that there's a tremendous amount of power there with that alignment to transform these jobs into good jobs that you can take pride in for the future and really support your family on, where each generation can do better than the next, and to make sure that every one of the people that we love that took care of us when we were children, like my grandparents, actually can have the ability to choose to stay at home or to choose the kind of care that really works for them, to have real options and to be able to have those options be affordable.
So Ai-Jen, Diane mentioned that she is part of the elder boom. I am in the sandwich generation that you mentioned in the book. I have a mother who by the first 2030 deadline will be 65 and over, and I have a 4-year-old now who will be about 12 or 13 by the time we get there. And so I have to start making my care plan, right? And I wanted, can you share a little bit about some ideas and solutions that you talk about in the book with our listeners?
Sure. Well, one piece that we've already mentioned is that there's some basic work that we need to do to secure this workforce and to establish a floor of protections. So in New York, we passed the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, and since we won in New York in 2010, 3 additional states have come online, and we're working now in Connecticut and Illinois to add another 2 states. And
That's right.
we want to create the kind of momentum that makes basic rights, protection, and equity for domestic workers the new norm. We've just got to establish that as the norm.
Ai-Jen, could I interrupt and ask you, so what does, when you say that, what are these basic rights that this bill and the other ones, what would they do for domestic workers?
They would provide paid time off, protection from discrimination and harassment and unjust firing, workers' compensation, and equal protection under the law with other workers, which admittedly are quite minimal. So we need to keep fighting for things like paid sick days, $15 an hour living wage. There's a lot that needs to be done to improve the quality of these jobs. These protections are building blocks, fundamentals that we need to put into place.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so on top of that, so there's this whole piece of work that we can do to really improve these jobs today. It's not long-term. Like, we can enact these bills. We have models to secure the floor for this workforce. We can also raise wages, and that's on individuals who hire. It's on Medicaid programs to ensure that they're adequately accounting for wages, fair wages in their budgets, their state budgets. It's on all of us to make sure that poverty wages aren't the norm in this caregiving sector, which is so vital to our future. And then we can also think about training. How are we offering career ladders and opportunities for this workforce to not only come out of the shadows, but also to develop professionally? And if you ever, Tamika will tell you, all of our members take so much pride in the work that they do. I mean, it is serious, and they are professionals, and they deserve nothing short of real career pathways and ladders to increasingly enhance their skill level and opportunity. And training programs, model training programs are emerging everywhere around the country, and we just need to continue to build those and resource those and invest in them. And then we can also offer things like tax credits and other supports to families who don't fall into the very narrow categories of families who qualify for programs that exist. We can expand caregiver tax credits. We can look at expanding and increasing the earned income tax credit to cover more care workers. We can ensure that family caregivers who leave the workforce actually don't lose their Social Security credits when they do so. So these are small things that can be done today. Long term, we need a whole new system to support caregiving comprehensively that actually creates more home and community-based choices. And we see the seeds of what some of those solutions look like when we think about what's happening with the village movement or with naturally occurring retirement communities where people have kind of built intentional communities to support each other. We need to actually factor in how do we support those communities to have the right caregiving supports that they need and the resources they need to really scale. How do we create real subsidies for middle class, lower middle class, and working class families to actually afford quality care? These are things that are a longer term process, but absolutely essential to the future vision of this country where all of us can actually thrive across generations.
Thanks, Ai-Jen. So I know with home care workers, I think over 50% of home care workers who leave the workforce cite that they leave the workforce because they were unable to make ends meet. They couldn't work full-time and put food on their table. Over 65% of home care workers rely on some kind of public assistance to close the gap in their households, right? I'm curious though, when we talk about, it sounds like we're talking about transforming the care industry for the workers and the consumers. What are some roles that the consumers can play?
Well, one of the things that we have been developing with a partner organization called Hand in Hand is the Fair Care Pledge. And what that is it's essentially a tool to raise awareness among consumers and families about the responsibility of having somebody work in your home. And that fairness is an essential ingredient to a healthy and a sustainable relationship between a consumer and a worker. And by fairness, we mean fair pay, paid time off, and a clear agreement about what the expectations and responsibilities are, one that really facilitates good communication and good feedback loops. So really simple. It's kind of like the stop, drop, and roll of what it means to have somebody work in your home is for consumers and employers to really embrace those three principles as a really good starting point to having a healthy employment relationship in your home.
If I could just comment a little bit on that. It seems to me that one of the issues when somebody, their parent has a stroke or their parent falls or they're just not as capable anymore as cooking for themselves, but they still want to stay in their home. That one of these things that happens all the time is, people don't know where to go. So they either are going to an agency, they're paying the agency more, but the worker doesn't give very much. Then there's the issue of, I don't know, I guess I call it turnover. Because of maybe there's not enough hours at this job or whatever. And it just strikes me that the issue as well, when children also, people coming home from a hospital, just need some temporary care or even long-term care, that it is so stressful for the family member or members and the patient or the person, how to adjust, how to get into a good relationship with somebody who's really in your home dealing with very intimate things with you. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about how, as individual domestic home healthcare workers, how it is that they would, I don't know, operate to have this sort of more equal relationship to the person who is employing them. This seems to me to be a big issue that domestic workers, you know, for always have had. It's this power relationship.
Absolutely, it's a real conundrum on every side. Where if you're an employer and you want to do the right thing, it's really hard to know what that is. And then in trying to do so, there are very little supports in place. And then for workers, it's just extreme vulnerability, no control over hours or the negotiation, and you've got your family depending on you, and it's a struggle to just survive. And it's either you're working long hours that are completely unsustainable, or you can't sustain because you're not getting enough hours of work, and you just have so little control over your livelihood and your time. So it's from any angle, it's really not working. And I'd love for Tamika to give an example locally of kind of how it plays out for our members in Atlanta. But I would just say that when something is like that, where on every side there are challenges, we as organizers see that as an opportunity to bring people together around common interests and common values. And I think in this case, we are really united by love for our family. And that can be a powerful force of connection and collaboration, and it is the basis for caring across generations. We don't actually see consumers as on the opposite side of this. Mm-hmm. We actually see ourselves as connected and completely interdependent, and we need each other to essentially overpower the kind of home care industry lobbying interests that would stand in the way of any of us living and working with dignity. So I think that there's an enormous basis for coming together, and we have to recognize that when we do that, it's an incredibly powerful force, one that the industry and agency interests actually can't meet. They're no match for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ai-Jen, you know, so part of our work is we fight for some real practical improvements in the sector, right? When we talk about increasing wages, having paid sick days off, process for evaluation, so there we see less and less unfair firing. I think that some of the pieces that are a little less tangible, but I think is what you're referring to, Diane, is we also are organizing for respect and dignity, right, for the entire sector. And I think that's where some of this falls. And so we as a chapter, we provide contract negotiation trainings to our members. And the idea is that our members are learning how, they're becoming empowered and learning how to negotiate for themselves without fear of losing their jobs. And how we express, and then they express to their employers, is that this then provides clarity for both parties about what the expectations are. And it's been a really useful tool for domestic workers, and it's really something that benefits both the workers and the employers. I can share a story in Atlanta, you know, why contract negotiation is so important. One of our members, one of our longtime members, who's actually now on our leadership committee, worked for a family as a nanny. She cared for 3 young children, and one day was asked, do you mind if some friends come over with their kids for a play date? So it's a one-off, it's just a one-time occurrence. And the nanny said, okay. And over the course of the month, what we saw were not just one additional family, but 2 additional families coming, with 3 to 4 additional children coming without any additional pay. So for several hours a week, this nanny was taking care of 7 to 8 children and was only being paid to take care of 3. And you're in that, you're stuck with that conundrum, right? Mm-hmm. Is how do I advocate for myself without jeopardizing my employment, because like Ai-Jen said, there are people counting on you. And so we were able to see this nanny actually work through that situation, kind of set some ground rules, and then look for employment that actually worked better for her, where she was able to negotiate a contract with her new employer, and she's still there now. But just to share a story about where some of, the respect and the dignity comes in is, this is the kind of work where, unlike a lot of other forms of work, where lots of additional jobs get slipped in. So you're hired as a nanny, but then you're a dog walker, but then you're a housekeeper, but then you're asked to move furniture. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I think that this point that you've raised about really creating consciousness and awareness among the domestic worker about what a valuable person and how valuable the work is, so that this, newfound confidence in their own worth is makes such a difference. And it's really the key thing, really, to all organizing among those who've been exploited or oppressed or suffer discrimination. That's really the first step, is the confidence that you can make a difference, you can stand up for yourself, you can speak for yourself. Ai-Jen, maybe just one more time, we will let Tamika say where this event is tomorrow night, and hope that many of our listeners will both come and get an opportunity to hear you personally and see you personally. And have you got the info?
I do. Do we have time for one more question?
If maybe another minute.
Ai-Jen, I was wondering, can you share a little bit about what's happening now to improve the working conditions for home care workers?
Yes, we're working really hard to move forward a rule change at the Department of Labor, which would close a loophole that has excluded 2 million home care workers from basic minimum wage and overtime protections for the last 75 years. And the Department of Labor has been a real partner of ours moving this forward, and we now need states to adopt the implementation of the home care rule change. And I will be talking more about this and other things at the bookstore tomorrow night, and really looking forward to seeing everyone in the great city of Atlanta.
Thanks for that opening, Ai-Jen. So tomorrow night we have the honor and the privilege of hosting Ai-Jen Poo, 7 p.m., Kara's Bookstore, 1189 Euclid Avenue Northeast. And we're going to dive deeper into the age of dignity and really get to answer some questions like, what do our own family care plans look like? It's time to start thinking about this.
Thank you so much, Ai-Jen. Have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Bye,
See you
Jen.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Before we close out, listeners, I do want to, we got an announcement about a demonstration, and I want to make sure that all of you who are interested in justice and good things for working people know that Thursday, the 19th, there will be a demonstration at Atlanta's Phillips Arena, where the group Maroon 5 is playing a concert. The issue is the treatment of the backstage workers by the company Live Nation, which uses a subcontractor called Crew One, which has failed to negotiate with these workers who have voted in a union, and it is all kinds of issues of pay and safety. So this demonstration starts at 5 o'clock. This is Thursday the 19th at Phillips Arena. All those interested in fighting for worker rights are, of course, encouraged to come. We will be back again next Monday. We think Paul will be back, Tamika and I will be back. We look forward to presenting another good hour of information about workers' issues here and around the world. This is Diane Mathewitz saying goodbye.
Goodbye.
And Tamika, and we want to, of course, say goodbye for Ozzy, our videographer, who is making us on the global video world, and of course Christopher Hollis, who is our engineer. So stay tuned for the next program, Democracy Now!